Hey, econ students, G here to talk to you today about fiscal policy options. Well, what economic ideas have shaped fiscal policy? Well, we have classical economics, we have Keynesian economics, and supply-side economics. Classical economics, so it's the idea that free markets will regulate themselves, is the main idea. So what they're saying is that if people just stay out of it, okay, then the markets will repair themselves and get back to equilibrium, and you don't need to do anything. The Great Depression, however, challenged these ideas, and the economy was unable to regulate itself, which led to high unemployment and immense bank failures. So, what event challenged the dominance of classical economics school of thought? We just said it. It's the Great Depression, and it's highlighted a problem with the classical economics. It did not address how long it would take for the market to return to equilibrium. We have the Keynesian economics. And so British economist John Maynard Keynes developed a new theory of economics to explain the Depression. And Keynes' approach focused on the workings of the economy as a whole. Right? And he argued that the Depression was continuing because neither consumer nor businesses had an incentive. Right? There was nothing that made them willing to spend enough to increase production. And the only way to end the Depression, according to Keynes, would be to find a way to boost demand. Well, that brought on the government's new role. So Keynes believed that the government should be responsible for spending more money in order to boost demand. And the government could make up for the drop in private spending by buying goods and services on its own. All right? And so in a recession or depression, businesses and consumers do not demand as much on the economy based on production that they once did. And Keynes argued if the government then makes up that difference, then the productive capabilities will continue to be higher. Keynes argued that fiscal policy can be used to fight periods of recession and periods of inflation, both. The government can respond to a drop in consumer spending by increasing its own spending until the spending in the private sector returns to a higher level, meaning it's not a continuous thing. Once regular spending levels return, then the government kind of cuts out. Or it can cut taxes so that spending and investment by consumers and businesses increases. Again, an incentive to spend, an incentive to invest. Keynes also argued that the government can reduce inflation either by increasing taxes, okay, so that's going to cost people more money, so there's less of an incentive to spend, or by reducing its own spending, which then drops production, again, contracting the economy. And we have the multiplier effect. And Keynesian economics holds that the key to the power of fiscal policy is the multiplier effect. And the multiplier effect simply states that every $1 change in fiscal policy creates a change much greater than $1 in the national economy. In other words, the effect of changes in fiscal policy are multiplied. One of the most important goals that fiscal policy can achieve is a more stable economy. When set up properly, fiscal policy can come close to stabilizing the economy automatically. That's that automatic stabilization idea. Taxes and most transfer payments are tied to gross domestic product and to the individual personal income. So they change automatically. It's a stabilizer. Thus, they are called automatic stabilizers. Tools of fiscal policy that increase or decrease automatically depending on changes in GDP and personal income. GDP goes up, spending goes up. Personal income goes up, spending goes up. All right? Consumption increases. The same can be said. GDP drops, and personal income drops, consumption drops. Thus, demand drops, aggregate demand. They automatically stabilize each other. But then we have supply-side economics. Unlike demand-side economics, supply-side economics is based on the idea that the supply of goods drives the economy, the supply, not the demand. Supply-side economists believe that taxes have a strong negative impact on economic output. The Laffer curve, which is what's over here, all right, illustrates the effect of high taxes on revenue. So we have low taxes here, all right, with low revenue. We hit this happy medium point of a 50% tax and revenues higher, right? And then we come down here to 100%, which is a high tax, which means there's no revenue going on, and that's because there's absolutely no incentive, none. All right, so you have to play that game of where along the curve do you set your tax rate. So when we're looking at taxes and output, the heart of the supply side argument is that tax cut increases total employment so much that the government actually collects more in taxes at the new lower rate. So if they lower the rate, people then spend more, businesses invest more, they hire more employees because they're not paying taxes with that money. They can increase productivity. Those people now have jobs, they're spending money, then they're getting taxed on their personal income tax and continue to make more money. So it's actually better for them financially if they have a lower tax rate, says supply side economics. And sometimes the government lowers taxes to stimulate the economy. So the impact of taxes over here shows that we have a paycheck $539.15. Sometimes when the economy is overheated, the government resorts to increasing taxes on individuals. Tax increases can be very painful because they leave you with less money to spend on goods and services or to save for the future. Those tax increases do more than help stabilize the economy and move it on to the next phase of the business cycle. Remember the economic roller coaster. They also provide the government with more resources to pay for a wide variety of public services like national parks. So then we have a use of fiscal policy throughout U.S. history. And in the 1940s, as the country entered World War II, the government spending increased dramatically. Obviously, we had to produce all of these things to send our troops to war: tanks, guns, uniforms, airplanes, all kinds of things. And just as Keynesian economics predicted, the additional demand for goods and services moved the country out of the Great Depression. Okay? And World War II is greatly credited with that production boost to actually get us out of the Great Depression. Between 1945 and 1960, the United States economy was extremely healthy. And then in the early 1960s, President Kennedy cut taxes in order to boost productivity. We wanted to boost productivity. And Keynesian economics was used on many other occasions in the 1960s and 1970s to adjust the national economy. And if you notice, the marginal tax rate just kept coming down, and then we had a little spike right here. But we'll talk about that. Well, in the 1980s, we had President Ronald Reagan rejected Keynesian principles when he became president in 1981, the Reaganomic era, or era. Reagan proposed a tax cut that, once in place, reduced taxes by 25% over 3 years. In a short term, the economy recovered and flourished, and Reagan did not believe the government should spend its way out of a recession. So, reduce taxes. All right, so when we look at this, there's fiscal policy options. There's classical economics with free markets and regulating themselves, and fiscal policy is limited, all right? And then we have Keynesian or demand-side economics, which demand for goods drives the economy, increases government spending to avoid recession, and decrease government spending control inflation. Then we look at supply-side economics, and that's the supply of goods drives the economy. Tax cuts increase employment and total output. And less government intervention is better for the economy. In each of those schools of thought, respectively, are used by economists today, and some like to put them all together. The generalization of this: the Great Depression spurred economist John Maynard Keynes to develop his idea that in the absence of consumer and business spending, the government needed to support the economy. And supply-side economics gained prominence beginning in 1981 when Ronald Reagan became president. And so we started to change from that classical economic view. Well, that's all I have for you today on fiscal policy options.